Hello and welcome back to Inspirability. Today we are back for Series 3. Today I have not one, but I have two guests. I have Paul and David Winstanley joining me today. Paul and David Winstanley, thank you very much for joining us today on Inspirability. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. This is a bit of a first for us to have brothers on the show, so I'm really excited to explore a bit about that brotherly relationship and a bit of maybe brotherly rivalry as well. So, Paul, you are an air traffic controller and you're also the chair of ATCOs for one of the UK's air traffic controllers unions. And you are a trustee with us here at Aerobility as well. And David, you are the CEO of Biggin Hill Airport. So welcome to Inspirability.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first of all, let's start then with growing up. What was it like growing up as brothers? First of all, who's the eldest?
I am the eldest by 3 years. Despite the grey that I'm carrying, but yes, Paul is, and I'm the youngest of the three. I'm sure we were no different from any other brothers. There is another brother. He's an elder brother, and there's a lot of rivalry, a lot of competitiveness, lots of arguments through the times. But we went to the same school, and we all developed a passion for sport. Actually, and eventually. It was the armed services that first kind of caught Keith's attention. I thought about going in the services, but I was always kind of the rebel of the family, so it was never going to suit me. But David followed Keith into the services. But eventually we ended up, I would be working closer with an air traffic background because David went to the Royal Air Force as I was going to say he couldn't make it as a pilot, but that would be a bit unfair, as an air traffic controller.
So, David, tell me a bit about your military career.
Following in Keith's footsteps is probably not the military for me was always an obvious one. I empathise with those that struggled in school. I did not find education at all easy. So when I reflect on your first question was childhood, I have to reflect I had a very, very positive childhood. We were very lucky as three brothers to reflect on that. And a lot of our characteristics, I think, stem from the way we were brought up, our relationship with our mother and our relationship with our father. But as far as me going in the military, it was kind of a no-brainer. I found school torturous, and I don't mind admitting it. But bizarrely, when I had a scout uniform on, it sounds strange, I was completely different. School, I was very withdrawn, struggled, not comfortable. Put a uniform on and I could go, you, go here, you, and it just felt natural. So I managed to get A-levels. It was a no-brainer joining the military. The mistake I made, slightly blinkered, I followed Keith in the Navy. Right military, wrong service. I should have joined the Air Force from day one. Don't regret the Navy time. Military career, I absolutely loved it. I loved every single second of it. But I got to a stage where my realization was I'd joined the military, my children hadn't. And I wasn't prepared to let them make continuing sacrifices. So I decided to retire and don't regret a second. And if someone came to me now and said, would you recommend the military? It's a different military. At a heartbeat, I would recommend it.
Well, how old were your children when you left the military?
I left in 2007, so Laura would have been 13. James would have been about 11.
So was that then looking at a bit of work-life balance, perhaps, and family balance? Is that the reason why you...
Yeah, absolutely. I to sustain the career in the military, you do get this, and Paul probably gets so next, and no doubt you did when you're, committed to flying. You get a very single-minded approach. And with the military career, that can become overwhelming, really overwhelming. It's all about next promotion, the next thing. And I suddenly turned around and realised that the last 5 years of my career, I've been living away from home. So I'd missed sports days. I'd missed parents' evenings. And I wasn't prepared to see my children move around every 2.5 years and lose friends. And I know how difficult I found school. So this whole concept of going to a new school every 2.5 years, I couldn't have survived that. So there's no way I was going to put my children through it. That's not the military's fault. That's more my focus.
It's interesting to hear you talking about work-life balance as well. because it's very hard, isn't it, juggling career and family and children. So let's talk a little bit actually about flexible working policies, because we were talking about this earlier on before the show.
We were.
And this seems like a good point to bring this in. So tell me now, in your role as CEO of Bigham Hill Airport, what are you trying to accommodate with regards to flexible working policies?
Well, we talked about balance, and I think relationships as a whole are changing. So you often don't get the always the mum, the dad, the two children. You can get different forms of relationships from a whole spectrum. So I think businesses now need to look at the employment force far more dynamically. And we were talking that I think one of the most untapped resources at the moment, most valuable, is women returning to work. And I say women because predominantly it is women. But we were also talking about having policies that match the way relationships are formed. So if it's a partnership, I have a lot of men who work for us who have flexible working so they can pick up the kids, so that they can contribute to that family network. So I think having flexible working across a whole spectrum, looking at your workforce differently, businesses have to do that. And it can be really valuable to businesses and people's quality of life. Happy at home, probably going to be happy at work.
And you're retaining talent as well in the business.
Absolutely. And I suppose the same for NACS must have the same challenges and the same opportunities.
And how is it at NATS? Because one thing we were talking about was equality and diversity policies. And we're saying that NATS is now fully set up for wheelchair users, but there are still no wheelchair users who are air traffic controllers.
Yeah, it's clearly a challenge in the tower, but our air traffic control centres, we have 2 of them in the UK, could easily accommodate someone in a wheelchair, but we don't. So, when we talk about equality and a diverse workforce, it's, yes, we do have family-friendly policies, but my challenge to the aviation industry, and I guess you'd expect me to say this as a trustee of this charity, is that, are we employing enough people with disabilities? And that's a challenge I'd set to my CEO at NACS. It's the same challenge I would set to David as a CEO at Bigham Hill. So
we've got the Equal Skies Charter though here at Aerobility. So what do you think employers can do to help promote accessibility for wheelchair users?
I think making the Equal Skies Charter as part of their business, letting people know what it means. I think it has to start at the top. So it has to start at the executive level. They have to buy in and encourage people to apply. I think, unfortunately, now with aviation, we're all fishing in the same pond. That's part of the problem. I think there are staffing challenges, resource challenges with air crew, and there is in our world in air traffic. So it's attracting the right people in, and there'll be significant challenges with people with disability as well. They'll still have to pass the right hearing test, pass the medical. They'll still have to get through the application process as well. But it's really making it aware. I mean, I don't know how many people know that air traffic control centres could accommodate people with disability. And, so I think there's an awareness piece that needs to be done.
Invisible role models as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Also, the challenge we've got is non-visible disabilities as well.
Yeah.
So not only Paul's right, and our sector, the business aviation sector, needs to look at itself carefully about wheelchair access. But in terms of non-visible disabilities, so neurodiversity is something that we as a business have focused on very recently. And interestingly, it was in partnership with Aerobility. Mike picked up the phone one day and said, "We've got this chap who's quite close to you, David. Mainstream education has failed him, but we're sponsoring his PPL. Could you help out with the instrument side?" Yeah, sure, we can do that. I met the individual's father, met the individual with Mike. I've cut long story short, this is an individual mainstream education have failed. So again, very close to my heart, didn't quite fit in. But when he was in a cockpit, he could fly an aircraft solo and pass his instrument test and be night current. So there's some inherent skills in that. So we got him on apprentice gig, and he's about to be made full-time rampager. So he will be towing around a business jet worth $85 million and parking that on a daily basis and marshalling them in. And that's somebody who, if Aerobility hadn't made the connection with us, we hadn't looked at neurodiversity in a different way, could have still been struggling in an education system that doesn't relate to him. So there are other things, remarkable things that Aerobility do that probably are not directly about the physical disability in flying. And I think it's a great story.
It's an incredible story. It's an incredible success story. And as you say, it's quite close to your heart as well. I imagine you felt quite a lot of empathy with the young Johnsman from mainstream education, having felt him.
A huge amount. We have a problem. We have Futures Week where we're trying to get young boys and girls interested in aviation. And they're not, by design, we don't look at those that are necessarily academically gifted. We look at people who just maybe have got a spark. And I stand up in front of them mostly and go, I didn't like school. I struggled at school. Did not go to university. Got my degree much, much later. And I just, went with my gut, what worked. And what we're trying to do is encourage people to do that. So the same way you're trying to encourage people to look at air traffic. I mean,
I think there's some natural barriers, though, aren't they? That people naturally assume in aviation, you've got to be really academically brilliant, and you don't. It's all about. I'm not academically, but obviously I'm better than my brother. But you'd expect me to say that. But I kind of fell out with my dad because I didn't go to university, and it was my first element of being a rebel. But to be an air traffic controller, and maybe it's the same with the pilot. I know you've got to have an attitude to be a pilot, but you don't have to be an academic whiz-kid. You just have to have an aptitude that you can apply a set of rules. Yeah, there's a bit of a flair that goes with it, a bit of skill set. But I think that's one of the barriers to aviation. People just naturally assume you need to have such a high level of education. For me, that's one of the barriers that you need to break down.
Psychologically, you kind of want somebody, though, don't you? Somebody's flying me around. I want them to have done loads of training. I want somebody in the front. It's a bit like, what is David Gunston saying?
But training is different, right? You select someone through whatever criteria you select them, and then you train them to do the job. You don't need a degree to be an air traffic controller. You don't need a degree to be a pilot. And I'd argue with my experience that, when I was training people, obviously a long time ago, the people who were easier to train were those people who'd lived life, seen a bit of life, might have dropped out from university, done a couple of jobs, fell into aviation in some form. They're far easier to train than someone who's been to Oxford or...
Do they want it more, though? Is that what...
Maybe that is part of it.
Was there an absolute desire
maybe
to them more to lose?
Maybe because they'd failed at a few adversities in their life, they wanted to make a career in aviation work. But, if you walked in 10 on-the-job instructors in air traffic, 9 of them are going to say, no, I'd rather have someone who's seen a bit of life than someone who's come straight out of an academic background.
Do you think they've also built up their toolbox maybe, so a bit more resilience?
I think resilience is absolutely key. Yeah. We have a phrase about bounce back ability. Certainly when you're training, I'm sure it's the same with aircrew, you're going to have a bad day, and that ability to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, is a key component of someone's going to be successful in aviation. I think, no 2 days are the same. You can't sit there and go, every Monday this is going to happen. And sometimes you get it wrong. I get it wrong. Sometimes the pilot gets it wrong. Sometimes a colleague will drop me in it as well. So you've got to have that level of resilience. And I think you do get that from life experience, yeah.
What do you do if you have a bad day? How do you bounce back?
It depends who I'm with. I think I've learned, I was a bit of a rebel as a kid. I did fall out with my dad, which was one of kind of a big regrets for a while. I just learned to, life is short. You've got to kind of compartmentalize things pretty quickly, I think. You can't change your past. So once the day's gone, the day's gone, right? Once you've made a mistake on the radar, provided it's not a massive mistake, that's gone. But you've got to learn from it. And if you have an attitude where you learn from it and you make better choices, then you're always on an upward path, right? But, I have this sort of, there's no new ways of getting things wrong. and every day is a learning day. The day you think you've got it hacked is the day you've got a problem, because I'm still learning now. I still learn in my union life. I still learn in my professional air traffic controller's life. I still learn in my trustee's life. I've made mistakes as a trustee, and you've got to look at it, debrief it, and make tomorrow better.
What about you, David? What do you do if you have a bad day? Obviously, as CEO, you've got lots of people to answer to.
Yeah, no, lots of bad days. I suppose in one way you can have a bad day, but you can't show you're having a bad day. You've got to a certain extent, ride that out, because that's what people expect of you. But you're only human. So I tend not to be that reflective. I don't like looking back. I don't necessarily see the value in it. My wife thinks it's one of my worst faults, because that means I'm very much in the moment. So there's no past, there's no future. I know that sounds quite glib, but I'm very much in the moment. Again, when it comes to things like planning for Christmas, Lynn's will plan for Christmas in July. Right now, Christmas could be the other side of the Atlantic for me. It's what's happening right now. So if I have a bad day, just keep going. There's always tomorrow. I'll just keep pushing through.
We're learning from failure. We're learning from any mistake.
I think you can, but I think you have to be careful about lessons learned, because lessons learned are context specific. I can have the same challenge. I can have had challenge today. The same challenge could present itself tomorrow, but the circumstances are slightly different. So I acknowledge experience. I think experience is fantastic. But what I really value is someone who can apply that tomorrow. It's great they did it yesterday. I admire them for it, and it's brilliant. But what are you going to show me tomorrow and the next day?
It's that adaptability, maybe.
Yeah, because that's going to solve the next problem. So I do get the point about learning lessons from the past. But that has to be context specific. Otherwise, I'm dragging myself back there, and I might be reminding myself of stuff that awaken that emotion. But if that emotion in the past doesn't serve me tomorrow, why am I putting myself through that? So just get on with it. I'll keep pushing through. What else are you saying? If you're in hell, keep going, because eventually you're going to get out.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it slightly differently in the sense that, when you do debrief something in your own head, even if it's in a leadership capacity and you debrief them, you didn't quite get it right, you didn't get your point across, or it's caused someone to have a bit of an argument with you when that was never your intent. I do look back and think, well, how much was that, like me from a behavioural point of view, had I prepared correctly? Why didn't I get my point across? Because, as a chair of an ATCO's branch, or even when I was an ops supervisor running a team, or as a CEO, part of it is you've got to bring people with you. That's fundamental part of the job, isn't it? You've got to bring people with you. And that when you get it wrong, that self-awareness that you've got it wrong, that you have to, I think, go over in your head and say, how much of that was me, how much of that was the situation? Because some of it is me, or you. Well, I'm not at all for you, but I've done a lot of that in my time growing up, probably. But a lot of it is how you present yourself, I think. And that's the biggest thing I've learned in these roles, where you go, sometimes it's easy to blame the situation. If it's an air traffic incident, it's a situation. But at the end of the day, you've still got an individual who has interacted in some way, whether that's the pilot, me on the radar, or whatever. And in the leadership role, it's the same sort of thing. So there is that element of self-awareness, I think. So, what was my part in all that?
You can, and you need to. Any leader is going to self-reflect. The issue for me is I'm not going to carry the baggage with me if it doesn't serve a positive. So I can chastise myself, and you should sometimes, and you reflect on a mistake you made. But don't dwell on it. Learn what you need to learn. Make sure you balance the emotion as well from what you need to learn, because the two are not the same.
Yeah.
You can carry the negative emotion, and the problem with negative emotion is you lose the real value of the lesson learned from a leader. Because at the end of the day, you've got to stand up the next day and do the same. You've got to perform. Because empathy is fantastic. Don't necessarily need to reflect that in frailty. You've got to separate the two. because the next day people are depending on you to make a decision. It can be your mistake. Learn from it. Don't dwell on it. And if you're going to learn from it, make damn sure you apply it the following day. Otherwise, what's the value in?
So I agree. Skills, learning, transferable skills from it, learning, like you said, self-awareness. So if you said something that caused conflict unintentionally, thinking maybe I won't deliver the same thing or a message, not the same message, but a message in that particular way next time.
Yeah, and I think it is predication on how you're brought up, how you're wired. You can change some of that, and the context can change some of that. But whether the lesson is negative or positive, it's still context specific. And I'd learn on it, but I won't allow myself to be necessarily dragged back to it. Because I'm thinking, I get it. If I can just empathize, fine. Next time I'm dealing with somebody who's had that same situation, I'll empathize.
Or a situation.
Oh, yeah.
In the same situation. But
I don't want to move them on. I don't want them to sit there. So I'll go, yeah, okay, so let's learn what we need to learn. Are we done? Have we got that? Have we got the emotion tied away? Good, right. Let's crack on. And that's, fault or not, very much how I'm wired.
I don't know whether that's kind of more of an, I don't tell you it's the wrong way because I want to find out, but it's almost more of a corporate leadership approach, whereas I look at it slightly differently from, I'm not saying you don't put people first, but I'm very much people-led, and people to me make the world go round. So, maybe it's a leadership style as well, so, and I don't know how you will comment to this, but, I look at leadership, and leadership isn't about seeking a consensus. Leadership for me is about shaping and molding a consensus. You can only do that with people. You can only bring people along with you, and that's just my view on. So, when you're going back and reflecting, I always reflect on, could I have done things better? Because I want to get the best out of people, and I'm not saying yours is purely a corporate view. I don't wish to take it like that, but that's just my outlook on it.
No, I wouldn't I wouldn't fall into that trap. When I, speaking from a Futures Week, for example, someone asked me the other day, what's the best part of your job? What's the part of your job you enjoy more? So my job is very simple. I create an environment where people can be the best they can be. That's my job, is to create an environment they can excel. Sounds a bit glib. How do you do that? Then you create an environment where they are empowered. Because the irony is, you can't empower somebody else. That's contradiction in terms. You have to create the space where they're empowered. So I am, like you, very people-centric, and hopefully that's how my own team would describe me. But I do my job by creating the environment that they can excel. Because if they're really going to be the best they can be, they have to step into that. Because what happens when I'm not there?
So it's delegations as well.
Yeah, yes, it is. But it's delegation with the responsibility and accountability.
Yes.
They've got to be accountable for what they do. Then they can learn it. Then they're going to grow. Because tomorrow I'm not there. Because ideally, if we've done our job properly, Paul, when you are no longer chair and I'm no longer CEO, both businesses should fly. If we've done our job properly.
What skills do you think a good leader makes? I'm really interested to hear the slightly different views. So David first, what do you think are the key skills a leader needs to have?
Truth. The key skill. That is such a tough question. Not for me.
Well, Paul, do you want to go first?
Two things for me. You need honesty and you need to be consistent. So consistency for me is the key element. You have to have a consistent approach. You have to have consistent behaviours, so that when you're going in, doesn't matter how difficult the conversations are, you are always being consistent with everybody. And I think the worst trait in a leader is someone who does not display a level of consistency. I think it just generates a negative environment, and I think it generates negativity anyway. It doesn't matter if you go in and you be, it's a difficult decision, difficult message. If you're delivering a consistent message to everybody, treating everyone the same, I think hands down, you're on the right step of being a positive lead.
David, what do you think?
I wouldn't disagree with anything Paul said. If you're consistent, you build trust.
Yeah.
Trust goes a huge way. And it's like I said before, I can't afford to have an off day. I can't go in and slam the door because I'm wound up. I can't go in and be moody. People just need to see you consistently perform. And it is about doing that role. And it is fulfilling a performance, not acting as if you're still being genuine, because you can't be consistent if you're not genuine. So probably trust. I have to trust those around me and they have to trust me. So I would put trust as probably the most powerful.
And how do you look after your mental health? Because that's a very stressful role that you have. And you also have a lot of other people around you and you're maybe looking after them as well. So how do you look after your own mental health?
I decompartmentalize very easily. I separate things in my life very easily. And I have triggers, as I said, I'm very much in the moment, which helps. Driving to and from work, I will have trigger points where I stop thinking about work, which is hard as a CEO because your phone's always on. And I'll have trigger points where I start thinking about home. So they are physical places. I can tell you now, Shars Lane, when I drive away from Biggin, it's about a mile down the road. I hit a roundabout near Keston. I turn right. That is it. I try and switch off from work. I'm driving, so I should be concentrating on driving. But one good thing at a time. And then when I'm leaving home, I join the A14 just north of Gaisley. Then I'm on work mode. So I have trigger points. And in the day, there'll be a time where I'll stop looking at emails. If you look at an email at 9 o'clock in the evening, and you know it's going to wind you up, then that's not clever. If they've emailed you at 9 o'clock, wait till the following morning. If it's that urgent, why didn't you email early in the day? Don't email me at 9 o'clock and expect a response, because you won't get one, because that's not good for my mental health.
I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to that as well. I think in this era of working from home and everyone's being so connectable all the time and connected, it's so easy to see an email at 9 at night, and then it's going to stress you out. You read it, and then you're just thinking about it while you're sleeping, and then you're not rested for the next day. And then you're less productive for the next day.
You've been rehearsing your answer. It's human. You'll read it. You'll get emotional because it'll wind you up. Then you're thinking about the response. Then not only are you thinking about the written response, you're probably playing the narrative. Like, what am I going to do when I speak to this person? And before you know it, you've wasted an hour and a half thinking about something that, if you hadn't read, you'll have stored the same emotions, but they'll be in the morning. You'll have had a full night's sleep. You'll be slightly more rested. You'll get a more appropriate response. I never send my first email. My team laugh at me because they know if I'm getting a little bit punchy, because the keyboard's hit quite loud. And we're in an open plan office, so people just outside will go, somebody's getting it. And I will never send my first email.
So you type it out, and then what do you do?
Yeah, and I will read through it 3 times. Or I'll ask Catherine to come and cast the work. She goes, you can't say that. And we'll amend it, because it's how you want that receiver to get the information. So I try and decompartmentalize. I try and have trigger points. Indicates that I sometimes mail, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Do you have your phone always on as well, or do you have a work phone that you then switch off, or does it need to be on all the time?
I learned from Birmingham, have your own phone and have a work phone. Never combine the two. That's just me. So I have personal emails on my personal contacts on my personal, and I try and keep the two completely separate. So I will turn that phone off, but I'll make sure my team know, or the CFO's available, or the commercial director's available. It's different when we've got a single shareholder. So my chairman, I work for my chairman. So I often joke, if on my phone you see the chairman, Mrs. Winstanley, or mum, they're about the only 3 people that I see the phones. Not in that order. So of course it's Mrs. Winstanley, mum, the chairman, and with that order.
Paul, how do you look after your mental health?
I think it's people in difficult journeys, really. So we talked about our upbringing. It was brilliant. But I don't know where societal has changed, as probably is as well. But we weren't great at talking to each other. My dad, bless him, had this phrase: "Tell them now, let them buy my paper." And in many ways, I think I struggle with that ability to compartmentalize things and relax. And I've always encouraged you with our teams. Now you find somebody, you find an oppo, find a mate. It doesn't have to be in air traffic. Just certainly in the role I do now in the union, there are days where you just need to just unload. Right, you've had a bad day. I mean, I have a 10-minute rule at home, so. And my wife's an air traffic controller, so she works shifts. But I have a 10-minute rule. I can just unload for 10 minutes. But after 10 minutes, that's it. So that's out.
Do you set a timer? Do you have a sound timer?
Pretty much. Well, quite. But it is like 10 minutes. That's all I've got. And I have, friends that do the same with, and likewise they do with us. And we've developed that as kind of a network, outside, because people do need to unwind. We've never really looked at mental health as seriously as we should have done in the job. And that's not just the pressure of being an operation like code, but even, in a corporate world or a union world, or even here, I guess, as well. So it's been one of those journeys that you've been on. I don't think blokes generally have grasped all this. Yeah. I still have people, in some of our teams where they're struggling with something and people are still inherently private. But boy, does it help when you talk. It's just a game changer, I think, when you talk and you just get things off. And the email stuff, I'm always on my phone. I never turn my phone off.
That's interesting. So it's very different.
Yeah, because normally it'll be a CEO call or a general secretary call or mum, which is by far the number one you'd answer. Okay. But for me, it's just part of the role. So if I don't answer it, I'll always phone somebody back. Yeah.
Do you find yourself burning out doing that, or stop yourself burning out?
I just, there are times when and Dave will joke when I'm on the golf course. I don't answer it when I'm on the golf course. I used to say de-stress when you go to
a golf you play.
Yeah.
It's an awful lot of time you're not answering your phone.
I wouldn't answer my phone at Old Trafford, but maybe I should start doing so because the football's not that great. But there are times I would just leave my phone. But if I'm on holiday or on leave, then my number 2 takes over, and I don't touch it at all. So I am offline.
I think we've got to switch off. I mean, I
am offline.
I would share Paul's view. Yeah, Dad was very much, and I often repeat the phrase, but I do it in a slightly different perspective. I do it like a social media thing. I don't do social media. So I would say, tell them now, let them buy paper. If they want to know what I'm doing, we'll pick up the phone and they'll ask me. And if they don't, then they're not that interested anyway. So I kind of channel Dad in that respect. We weren't necessarily that open, so that the three of us would not have discussed things as brothers. I don't criticize my father for that, or my mother. Loved them dearly, and they brought us up to birth. It's just the way society then talked about it. But I'm far more open with my son. Far more open. Oh yeah, I hug my son, I kiss my son, I tell him I love him. All of the things that Dad, I knew, felt, but wouldn't have always conveyed them. So
that's societal.
It's quite strange. And we'll share this because it's private. When we went to bed, when we were children, we shook our parents' hands.
Yeah.
It was just, and I was brought up to think that was perfectly normal, perfectly all right. I have no problem with it. But I remember when James and Laura were tiny and we were at 16 Lanslaw, James going to hug Dad. And Dad hugging him back. And I could see Dad, first of all, was going, okay, we don't shake hands then. And I remember saying to Dad, no, we don't shake hands, Dad. Our form of shaking hands is we hug. It's just the same as shaking hands, Dad. This time we hug. It's a bit like dipping your bread in the gravy. Family thing, you have a Sunday roast, you dip your bread in the gravy at the end. When Dad would always tell us that when he was growing up, Grandad wouldn't allow him to dip the bread in the gravy. Yet, when Grandad came to my dad's home, he made a point. He didn't want the gravy. He didn't want the bread. But my dad went out to the kitchen, got the bread, put it in the gravy, just so he could say, my house, my roots. So yeah, I think we switch off in different ways. But Paul's right. Mental health, for those that are comfortable talking about it, talk about it. If you're not, things like, and I'm sure you have it, we have an employer's assistant program.
Yeah.
But they don't have to tell us as the employer anything. They can go direct and speak. And I think in employment environments, that's hugely critical. The last thing you want is a system where you've got a challenge. Your boss is not always the best person to go to.
No.
That's the reality. So find an outlet.
Yeah, we have confidentiality lines as well. And, we have our own personal case team, and some people, we sit separately to our exec from a union point of view, and they are a team who are highly trained in what they do. And if people want to talk to them, they talk to them, and we don't get to know. And that's it should be done in confidence. But, it's going back to that leadership thing, so I've tried to concentrate on things where the team I work with, you try and get to know them as people. And therefore, so if they display something that's, out of character or something, you do go and put your arm around them and go, look, if you want to talk about somebody, there's something else going on. And I'm not always the best person for them to talk to, but if there is someone who can help them get through whatever they're getting or experiencing, then that's got to be better for everybody. And huge. And that's the thing about, spending time to know your team. I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah. You walk into a room and you know your team well enough. You'll pick the non-verbal communication up.
Yeah.
You know actually intrinsically when someone's had a bad day. But we normally walk in and we go, oh, how are you? And everybody goes, oh, I'm okay, or I'm not too bad. Ask the question again if you're worried. No, are you okay? And you'll get a different answer if you ask it twice.
I think what you're talking about is empathy as well in terms of leadership, because that's such a valuable skill, isn't it? That empathy and that ability to see a difference in that baseline behavior of most of your team.
Yeah.